My security camera keeps catching me. Leaving the house. I've been home all week. I work remotely, so I barely leave the house. Last Monday, I realized I hadn't been outside in 4 days. I know this because I ordered groceries, worked from my desk, and spent every evening playing games. On Thursday, my security camera app sent me a weekly activity summary. There were 12 motion events. Curious, I opened them. The first clip showed me leaving through the front door at 2:13 a.m. Wearing the exact hoodie I was wearing while watching the recording, I frowned. The timestamp had to be wrong. The next clip was at 3:47 a.m. There I was again. Walking back inside, head lowered, hands in my pockets. I don't sleepwalk. I've never sleepwalked. I checked the rest, every night, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always leaving, always returning. The strange thing, I never once looked at the camera. I kept my head down like I knew exactly where it was. Friday night I decided to stay awake. I made coffee, turned every light on, sat in the living room facing the front door. 2 a.m. Nothing. 2:30. Nothing. 3:10. My phone buzzed. Motion detected. Front door. I looked at the door. It hadn't moved. The notification showed a live preview. Someone was standing on my porch. It was me. The camera showed me unlocking the front door from the outside. At the exact moment, I was staring at the same door from inside my house. The doorknob began to turn. I froze. It slowly opened. Nobody came through. The hallway beyond was empty. My phone chimed again. The motion event had ended. I replayed it immediately. This time, the video didn't show anyone opening the door. It showed me standing on the porch, looking directly into the camera, smiling, then speaking. The camera doesn't record audio, but it generated automatic captions. One sentence. "He's still in there. I called the police. They searched the house. Nothing." One officer asked to see the footage. Halfway through watching it, his expression changed. He paused the video, zoomed in on the glass beside my front door. The reflection wasn't empty. Someone was sitting on my couch, watching the door, waiting for me to let myself in. The officer slowly turned toward my living room. It was empty. He never told me what made him go pale. He just said, "You shouldn't stay here tonight." I haven't. But every morning at 3:12 a.m., my security app sends the same notification. Motion detected. Resident has arrived home. My wife started saying goodnight to someone after I fell asleep. My wife has always gone to bed later than me. She reads for an hour, checks on the dog, locks the doors, then comes to bed. We've been married 9 years. Routine never changes. About 3 weeks ago, I woke up around 1 a.m. to her whispering. I couldn't make out the words. I assumed she was on her phone. The next night, it happened again. Except this time, I clearly heard her say, "Good night. He's asleep now." I rolled over. She was facing the bedroom door, not her phone. The door. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled and asked if I wanted some water. I didn't mention what I'd heard. A few days later, I decided to pretend to fall asleep. I slowed my breathing, didn't move. About 40 minutes later, I heard the mattress shift as she sat up. Then, "Good night." A pause. "I'll keep pretending." Every hair on my body stood up. I wanted to sit up and ask who she was talking to. Instead, I stayed still. After another minute, she lay back down. The next morning, I casually asked if she'd been sleep-talking. She laughed. No. That was it. No hesitation. No confusion. Just no. I bought a small audio recorder. That night, I hid it under the bed. The next morning, I listened. For almost 6 hours, there was nothing. Then, at 12:58 a.m., she sat up. "Good night." Silence. Then another voice answered. A man's voice, very close, almost underneath the microphone. I know. I nearly dropped the recorder. There shouldn't have been anyone else in that room. I confronted her after work. She listened to the recording twice, her face drained of color. Then she whispered, "That's not your voice." Neither of us slept that night. Around 3 a.m., something tapped gently beneath the bed. Once. Twice. 3 times. My wife grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Then she whispered, "Don't look." The tapping stopped. About a minute later, we heard slow footsteps walking around our bed. Except, the bedroom door never opened. The footsteps stopped beside my side of the bed, right next to my head. A man's voice quietly said, "He's awake tonight." Then my wife answered, without opening her mouth. The voice came from under the bed, in her exact tone. "Yes." I know. The next morning we checked beneath the bed. Nothing. Except the recorder. It had captured everything, except my wife's voice. On the recording, every response came from underneath us. My grandfather left me a house in the woods. He also left me a list of rules. When my grandfather died, nobody in the family wanted his house. It sat alone in the middle of a forest in northern Maine, about 20 miles from the nearest town. No internet, no cell service. One dirt road in, one dirt road out. Everyone called it the cabin, but it was really an old 2-story farmhouse that had somehow survived 100 brutal winters. My grandfather lived there alone for almost 40 years. People in town respected him, but nobody ever visited after sunset. At the funeral, my mother begged me not to accept the inheritance. "Sell it," she said. "Don't spend a night there." When I asked why, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "He never told you?" "Told me what?" She just shook her head. "No, I guess he wanted to spare you." I arrived 3 days later. The place looked exactly as I remembered from childhood. The same peeling white paint. The same rusted windmill. The same porch swing creaking in the wind. Inside, everything was spotless. Almost too spotless. On the kitchen table sat a single envelope with my name on it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. If you've decided to stay here, read every word before sunset. There are rules. They're simple. Follow them exactly. 1. Lock every door before dark. Every one. 2. Close every curtain. Do not look outside after 11:30 p.m. 3. If you hear knocking, ignore it. 4. If someone calls your name from outside, they are lying. 5. If you wake up and the hallway is longer than usual, close your eyes and walk back to bed. 6. Never answer the telephone after midnight. 7. If you see me sitting in the living room, do not speak to me. 8. Above all else, do not go into the basement after 2 a.m. It ended with one final sentence. You'll only have to do this until it realizes I'm gone. I laughed. It felt like the sort of creepy joke Grandpa would have loved. Still, I locked the doors anyway, just in case. The first night was quiet, almost disappointingly quiet. Around 10 p.m., I made coffee and watched an old DVD. At exactly 11:30, every cricket outside stopped. Not gradually, instantly. The silence was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming from 2 rooms away. Then, 3 slow knocks. Front door. Knock. 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 I remembered Rule 3. Ignore it. The knocking continued for almost 5 minutes, then stopped. A few seconds later, 3 knocks on the back door. I checked the security cameras. Nothing. Not a person. Not an animal. Nothing at all. The second night was worse. At 12:17 a.m., someone softly called my name. Not shouted, whispered, from somewhere outside the bedroom window. "Daniel." Exactly my grandfather's voice. I almost answered. Then I remembered Rule 4. If someone calls your name from outside, they are lying. The whisper came again, closer. "I know you're awake." Then, I'm cold. The third night I made my first mistake. The phone rang. An old rotary phone in the hallway. I hadn't even realized it worked. Midnight. Exactly. I stared at it while it rang. Once, twice, 10 times. Then curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up. There was no static, no breathing, just my grandfather's voice. "You answered." Click. The line went dead. Every light in the house switched off. The power returned 30 seconds later, but something was different. The hallway outside my bedroom was twice as long. I froze. Rule 5. If you wake up and the hallway is longer than usual, close your eyes. Walk back to bed. The problem was, I hadn't just woken up. I was already standing in the hallway. At the far end, I could barely make out a figure. Tall. Too tall. Its head touched the ceiling. It wasn't moving. I shut my eyes, turned around, walked. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I counted my steps. 1, 2, 3. The floorboards creaked behind me. 4, 5. Something breathed against the back of my neck. 6, 7. My bedroom door should have been there. It wasn't. 8, 9, 10. Then I felt my bed touch the back of my legs. I sat down without opening my eyes. When I finally looked, everything was normal again, except for one thing. There were muddy footprints leading into my bedroom. Only one set. They ended beside my bed, facing me. I decided to leave the next morning, packed my car, loaded everything, turned the key. Nothing. Battery dead. It had been brand new. When I lifted the hood, the battery was gone. Not disconnected. Gone. That afternoon, I searched the house for a spare. Instead, I found the basement key, taped underneath the kitchen table. There was a note attached. "You'll need this eventually." I didn't sleep that night. At 1:58 a.m., I heard something heavy move beneath the floor. At 1:59, a slow scraping sound, like a chair dragging across concrete. At exactly 2, someone knocked, not at the front door, from underneath the floorboards. 3 slow knocks, then my grandfather's voice, perfectly clear. "Don't let it out." Silence. Then another voice answered. Not my grandfather. Not human. Calm. Patient. Ancient. I already did. The basement door, at the end of the hallway, slowly creaked open on its own. From somewhere deep below, I heard footsteps, not climbing the stairs, walking away from them, as if whatever had been trapped down there had been waiting for someone else to inherit the house. And now, it no longer needed the basement at all. My town has a curfew nobody talks about. I grew up in a tiny town with about 900 people, the kind of place where everyone knows your name. When I was a kid, my parents had one strange rule. Never be outside after 2:17 a.m. Not before sunrise. Not late at night. Exactly 2:17. Whenever I asked why, my dad would just say, because that's when they count. I assumed it was some weird family joke. I moved away at 18. Last month, I came back from my father's funeral. That night, after too much whiskey and too many old memories, I decided to take a walk. At 2:10 a.m., the streets were empty. Not unusual. At 2:15, every porch light in town switched off, at the exact same moment. I checked my phone. No power outage, just every light. At 2:17, I heard footsteps, hundreds of them, perfectly synchronized. But I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps got louder, closer, closer. Then a front door opened. An elderly woman I'd known my whole life stepped onto her porch. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking behind me. Without turning her head, she whispered, "Don't let them know you can see them." The footsteps stopped. Complete silence. Then I heard breathing, right beside my ear. A voice said, 38. Another voice answered, "No, 39. I spun around. Nothing. The woman on the porch covered her face. Then every house on the street, every single one, opened its front door. People stood silently on their porches, watching the empty road. Nobody acknowledged me. Nobody moved. Then every one of them spoke together. 40. A child somewhere screamed, "There's an extra one!" The silence that followed felt wrong, like the whole town had stopped breathing. Then, every person slowly turned their heads toward me. Not their bodies, just their heads. Farther than a human neck should allow. One by one, they smiled. Not happily. Like they'd finally figured something out. The footsteps started again. This time, I could see what was making them. The road was full of footprints. Fresh ones. Appearing one after another. As if invisible people were walking toward me. I ran. I made it back to my dad's house and slammed the door. Every light in the house turned on by themselves. Someone knocked once, twice. Then a calm voice said, "We only counted 40. You left before we finished." The knocking stopped. Nothing happened for 10 minutes. Then my phone buzzed. It was an emergency alert. No sound, no vibration, just a notification. It read, "Population update. Town residents, 901. When I'd arrived that morning, the welcome sign had said 900. The next morning, I drove out of town. As I passed the sign, I looked in the mirror. Someone was sitting in my back seat, watching the road behind us, waiting for 2:17 a.m. I took the night shift at a hotel that doesn't exist. During the day, I was desperate for work. After being laid off, I'd spent 2 months applying everywhere with no luck. Then I found an ad pinned to the notice board in a grocery store. Night receptionist needed 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Excellent pay. No experience necessary. There was no company logo, just an address I'd never heard of. The interview lasted less than 5 minutes. The manager, an older woman named Margaret, asked only one question. "Can you follow instructions exactly?" I laughed. "Sure." She didn't. She slid a laminated card across the desk. "Read these every night." Hotel Rules 1. Never check room 8 after 1 a.m. 2. If a guest asks for room 12, apologize and tell them it isn't available. 3. If the elevator arrives on floor 4 by itself, do not enter. 4. Ignore the children playing in the hallway. 5. Every guest who checks in must have a reflection. 6. At 3:33 a.m., someone will ring the front desk bell exactly once. Do not look up for 30 seconds. 7. If the lobby clock ever reads 3:34, leave the building immediately. I assumed it was some kind of hazing ritual. Margaret stared at me. I'm serious. My first shift was quiet. The hotel only had 20 rooms. The guests barely spoke. Most checked in without luggage. None stayed more than one night. Around midnight, a man wearing a soaking wet business suit approached the desk. "I'd like room 12. I remembered the rules. "I'm sorry, sir. It's unavailable." He sighed. "I know." Then he walked out into the rain. The strange thing, the parking lot was bone dry. At 1:15 a.m., I heard someone laughing upstairs. Children, running, doors opening and closing. I checked the guest list. No families, no children. I remembered Rule 4. Ignore them. At 2:40 a.m., the elevator dinged. Nobody had pressed the button. The doors opened. Empty. The display read 4. There were only 3 floors. The door stayed open for almost a minute. Something wet slowly dripped onto the floor. Then the doors closed. At exactly 3:33 a.m., ding! The front desk bell rang once. Rule 6. Do not look up for 30 seconds. Easy enough. I stared at the guest register. 1, 2, 3. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Crossing the lobby. Stopping directly in front of the desk. Someone breathed. Very quietly. I kept staring down. 28. 29. 30. When I looked up, nobody was there. But the guest book was open to a page I hadn't seen before. There was only one name written on it. Mine. Under departure time, someone had written 3:34 a.m. The lobby clock clicked forward. 3:34. Every light in the hotel went out. At the same instant, every room door upstairs slammed shut. One after another. 20 doors. Bang. 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 The emergency lights flickered on. Everything glowed red. Then every room phone started ringing. At once. The sound echoed through the building. I remembered the last rule. Leave immediately. I grabbed my keys and ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. I unlocked it. Nothing. I threw my shoulder into it. Nothing. Behind me, the elevator dinged. Its doors opened. The display no longer showed a floor number. It simply read, Home. Something stepped out. I only saw its shoes. Bare feet. Too many toes. Then another pair. And another. As if several people were trying to leave the elevator through the same doorway at once. I ran toward the emergency exit. Locked. Every exit was locked. The phone stopped ringing. Silence. Then, from every room at once, came the sound of doors opening. I looked down the hallway. Every guest was standing outside their room, perfectly still, watching me. The man in the wet suit, an elderly woman I'd checked in hours earlier, a little girl I'd never seen before, a soldier in a uniform decades out of date, dozens of faces, all expressionless. Then, in perfect unison, they said, "Reception closes now." Every one of them took a single step toward me. The lights went out again. When they came back, the lobby was empty. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The hotel was gone. I was standing in the middle of an abandoned parking lot. The building had vanished. Only cracked asphalt remained. Confused, I drove into town and found a cafe. I asked the waitress where the hotel had gone. She looked puzzled. There hasn't been a hotel on that road in 30 years. What happened to it? It burned down. She hesitated. They never figured out why every guest was standing quietly in the lobby. Didn't anyone survive? She looked at me strangely. There weren't any survivors. She reached behind the counter and pulled out a framed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Night clerk among 27 dead in hotel fire." There was a black and white photograph beneath it. The receptionist looked exhausted. He was standing behind the front desk, wearing the same uniform I had on the night before. The name tag on his chest read, Daniel. My name. The photo was dated October 14th, 1994. I wasn't even born until 1998. I deliver food for a living. Last night, I accepted an order that wasn't meant for the living. I've been delivering food for almost 4 years. Most nights are exactly the same. Pick up the order, follow the GPS, drop it off, move on. You meet some strange people, sure, but nothing that ever made me think twice. Until last Friday. It was pouring rain. and I'd already decided I was going home after one last delivery. That's when an order popped up. Pickup, 11:47 p.m. Restaurant, Miller's Diner. Customer, no name listed. Address, 131 Blackwood Lane. The payout was ridiculous, almost £90 for less than a 10-minute drive. I accepted it without thinking. When I got to the diner, the waitress looked confused. "You're actually here?" "What do you mean?" She slid a single paper bag across the counter. "I thought they'd stopped sending drivers." "Who's they?" She just shrugged. "I don't know. Forget I said anything." As I walked out, she called after me. "If nobody answers." She hesitated. "Don't leave the food." Blackwood Lane wasn't on the GPS until I was almost there. The road seemed to appear out of nowhere, branching off from the main highway. No streetlights, no houses, just trees. Halfway down the road, my phone lost signal. Then the GPS froze. A voice replaced it. "You have arrived." I looked around. Nothing. Just one old house sitting at the end of a gravel driveway. No lights, no cars. The number on the mailbox read 131. I grabbed the bag and walked to the porch. Before I could knock, the front door slowly opened by itself. Inside was complete darkness. "Delivery?" No answer. Just a smell. Not rotten, not damp. Just old. Like opening a box that hadn't been touched in decades. I remembered what the waitress had said. "Don't leave the food." So I turned to walk back to my car. That's when a voice behind me said, "You forgot the drink." I froze. There hadn't been a drink. I looked in the bag. There was now a paper cup sitting beside the food. Ice rattled inside it. I placed the bag back on the porch. "I'm sorry. I can't come inside." Silence. Then, I know. The door slowly closed. I should have left. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the delivery app. The order was still active. No option to complete it. Just one message. "Please wait for customer confirmation." 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally. The front door opened again. An elderly man stepped outside. He smiled politely. "Sorry to keep you waiting." He looked completely normal. Gray sweater, slippers, umbrella tucked under one arm. He handed me a £20 note. "Thank you." I finally completed the order and drove away. The next morning, I noticed the £20 was strange. It felt different. The paper was thicker. The king's portrait wasn't right. When I looked closer, it wasn't King Charles. It was someone I'd never seen before. The date printed underneath read 1891. I took it to a local collector. He stared at it for nearly a minute. "Where did you get this?" I told him. His face went white. "That's impossible." He pulled out an old newspaper clipping from a folder. The headline read, "Blackwood family dies, waiting for help." During blizzard. The photograph showed the family standing on the porch of the same house. In the front was the old man who tipped me, holding the same umbrella. The article was dated February 1891. I went back that evening. The road was gone. There was no turnoff. No Blackwood Lane, no mailbox, nothing. I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. 3 nights later, another order appeared. Pickup, Miller's Diner. Customer, no name listed. Address, 131 Blackwood Lane. This time the payout was £120. I declined it. A second later, it appeared again. I declined. Again. Again. Every time I rejected it, the amount increased. £200, £350, £500. Eventually, I turned my phone off. When I got home, it turned itself back on. The order was still there. only now there was a customer note. "You forgot your change." Attached was a photo. It was my front door, taken from outside. The timestamp read, 1 minute ago. I looked through the peephole. Nobody. Then there was a polite knock, 3 soft taps. A familiar voice called through the door. "Delivery for the driver." I didn't answer. The knocking stopped after a minute. The next morning, I opened the door. Sitting neatly on my welcome mat was a paper delivery bag, still warm. My name was written on the receipt. Under customer, it said, "Next pickup, Friday, 11:47 p.m. At the bottom, in tiny print, was one final line. "No cancellations after your 3rd delivery." I work in a 24-hour supermarket. Every night at 3 a.m., one customer shops alone. I've worked the night shift at a supermarket for almost 2 years. If you've never worked overnight retail, it's mostly stocking shelves, cleaning, and dealing with the occasional insomniac buying frozen pizza at 2 a.m. By 3 a.m., the store is usually empty, except every Thursday. Exactly at 3 a.m., an old man walks through the automatic doors. He never says hello. He never smiles. He always wears the same long black overcoat, even in the middle of summer. And he always buys the exact same 5 things: a loaf of white bread, a carton of milk, a jar of strawberry jam, a packet of tea, and a single white candle. The total always comes to £11 and 87 pence. Always. No matter what the prices in the store actually are. The first time I noticed, I joked with my manager, "Your regular's back." His smile disappeared. If he comes to your till, he lowered his voice. "Don't ask if he found everything." I laughed. "Why?" "Because he'll tell you." A few weeks later, I was covering the front tills alone. At exactly 3 o'clock, the automatic doors opened. The old man walked in. He gathered his 5 items and placed them on my conveyor belt. The register rang them up. £11 and 87 pence. Just like always. I scanned the last item and, without thinking, slipped into my customer service script. "Did you find everything you were looking for?" The old man slowly looked up. His pale blue eyes locked onto mine. "No." His voice was quiet. "I'm still looking for my wife." He picked up his shopping, paid in exact change, and walked away. Something about the way he said it made the hairs on my arms stand up. After he left, I asked my manager what the big deal was. He sighed and disappeared into the office. When he came back, he was holding a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local couple die in supermarket fire." The article was from 1989. According to the story, the building that stood here before our supermarket had burned to the ground. A husband escaped. His wife didn't. The photo beside the article showed the husband. It was the old man, wearing the same black coat. "I thought this was rebuilt in the 90s, I said. It was. "So how?" My manager interrupted me. Every Thursday was the night of the fire. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just an old customer who looked like the man in the photo. Then the CCTV footage disappeared. Every Thursday, between 3 o'clock and 3:15. No recordings. Just 15 minutes of black screen. The following Thursday, I decided to watch. The old man entered as usual, collected his 5 items. Then, instead of heading to the tills, he walked into aisle 9. I followed him. Halfway down the aisle, he stopped in front of the shelves. There was nobody else there. He smiled. "I found you." For just a second, I thought I saw another figure standing beside him. A woman. Faint. Almost transparent. She reached for his hand. The lights flickered. When they came back, the aisle was empty. Both of them were gone. The store closed early that morning. Nobody could explain where the old man had gone. The front doors had never opened. The alarms had never gone off. He had simply vanished. The next Thursday, I worked another night shift. At 2:59 a.m., my manager handed me a white candle. Put this on till 3. Why? He only stops looking if he thinks someone else already found her. I didn't understand, but I did it anyway. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doors slid open. The old man stepped inside. He looked at the candle waiting on the till. Then he looked at me. For the first time. He smiled. He turned around and walked back out into the darkness without taking a single item. He hasn't returned since. But every Thursday morning, when we open the store, there's a fresh loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a jar of strawberry jam, and a packet of tea sitting neatly on till 3. The candle is always gone. My new house has a room that wasn't on the floor plan. I bought my first house last year. It was cheap, which should have been my first warning. 3 bedrooms, a big garden, quiet neighborhood. The previous owner had passed away, and the family wanted it sold quickly. During the viewing, the estate agent gave me the floor plans. Everything matched. Kitchen, living room, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. No surprises. At least, that's what I thought. The first night I moved in, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow footsteps, back and forth. I assumed it was the old wooden floors settling. Then I remembered something. I lived alone, and I only had 1 floor. The next morning, I searched the house. Nothing. But when I opened the hallway closet, I noticed something strange. The back wall was slightly different from the rest. Fresh paint. I knocked on it. Hollow. There was a room behind it. I called the estate agent. He sounded confused. There shouldn't be anything there. Shouldn't? A long pause. Some houses have changes made over the years. That answer didn't help. I removed the loose panel that evening. Behind it was a small door. Old. Wooden. With a rusted handle. Inside was a tiny room. No windows, no furniture. Just 1 chair in the middle, and a children's drawing taped to the wall. It showed a picture of a house. A stick figure family stood outside, except there were 4 people drawn inside the house. I lived alone. At the bottom of the drawing were 3 words. He lives here. I decided to leave the room alone. I replaced the panel and tried to forget about it. That night, at 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of scratching, coming from inside the wall. Not outside. Inside. I grabbed my phone and recorded it. The scratching continued for almost a minute, then stopped. A child's voice whispered, "Can you let me out?" I moved out the next day. A week later, I returned with the estate agent to collect my things. I asked him about the hidden room. He looked genuinely scared. I didn't know it was still there. Still, he sighed. The last owner told us about it. Said his daughter used to play in there when she was little. What happened to her? He looked at the floor. She disappeared. Before I left, I checked the room one last time. The chair was still there. The drawing was still on the wall. But something had changed. The picture had been altered. The stick figures outside the house were gone. Now there was only 1 figure, standing inside, and underneath it, written in fresh black marker, "Thank you for opening the door." I thought my neighbor was copying me. I had it backwards. I live alone in a small apartment building with paper-thin walls. The guy across the hall moved in about 6 months ago. Quiet. Never said hello. Always left at odd hours. The weird part started with sounds. I'd hear my chair scrape across the floor. Then, a second later, I'd hear his chair scrape. I'd cough. A second later, he'd cough. I laughed it off at first. The walls were thin. Maybe it echoed. But then it got stranger. One Friday, I decided to rearrange my living room. About 20 minutes later, I heard furniture dragging from his apartment. The exact same pattern. Sofa. Pause. Coffee table. Pause. Bookshelf. It felt deliberate. I joked to my sister that my neighbor was secretly obsessed with me. She told me to stop watching horror movies. A week later, I came home sick from work. As I unlocked my door, I noticed his apartment was silent. No TV, no footsteps, nothing. I stepped inside and heard footsteps above me. I don't have an upstairs neighbor. Then they stopped. That night I couldn't sleep. At around 2:30 a.m., I heard movement in the hallway. Someone stopped outside my door. No knock, just breathing. After nearly a minute, the footsteps walked away. The next morning, I bought one of those little peephole cameras. Nothing happened for 3 nights. On the 4th night, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the app. The hallway was empty. Then, a face slowly leaned into view. Not my neighbor. Me. Same hair, same pajamas, same scar over my eyebrow. The thing smiled. It didn't have teeth. The recording ended. I ripped my apartment apart looking for hidden cameras. Nothing. I called the landlord. He checked the hallway footage. Nobody had been outside my door. I showed him the video. He went quiet, then asked, "Why are you standing outside your own apartment?" I moved out the next day. Months passed. Eventually, I convinced myself it was stress. Until yesterday. I got a package with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed my old apartment door. Standing outside it was my former neighbor, unlocking my apartment, while I stood behind him, watching, smiling, without teeth. My new apartment has a second peephole. I moved into apartment 6B last month. It was cheap, clean, and surprisingly quiet. The only odd thing I noticed during the viewing was that my front door had 2 peepholes. One at normal height, the other about a foot lower. I assumed the previous tenant had kids. The landlord just said, "Don't use the lower one." I laughed. He didn't. A week later, someone knocked at 2:11 a.m. 3 slow knocks. I checked the normal peephole. Empty hallway, no footsteps, nothing. Then I remembered the second peephole. Curiosity won. I looked through it. Instead of the hallway, I was looking into my own apartment. I saw my living room, the sofa, the lamp, even the back of my own head. I was standing at the front door, looking through the upper peephole. I stumbled backward. When I looked again through the normal peephole, the hallway was still empty. The lower one now showed an empty apartment. The next night, it happened again. 3 knocks. This time, when I looked through the lower peephole, my apartment was dark. I wasn't at the door. I was asleep on the couch. Something was standing beside me. It was too tall to fit comfortably in the room. Its neck bent at an impossible angle as it watched me sleep. I spun around. The apartment was empty. I decided to cover the lower peephole with tape. The following morning, the tape was lying neatly folded on the floor. That evening, there was a note slipped under my door, written in shaky handwriting. "Please don't cover the window. It's the only way we know if you're still alive." There was no name, just a small apartment number in the corner. 5B. I went downstairs to ask my neighbor about it. Apartment 5B didn't exist. The building skipped from 5A to 6A. I've lived here for 6 months now. Every night at exactly 2:11, someone knocks. Every night, I look through the lower peephole. Sometimes I see myself asleep. Sometimes I see myself standing at the window. Once, I saw my apartment completely empty. Those are the nights I don't sleep, because sooner or later, the version of me in the peephole always notices that I'm watching, and every time it smiles just a little bit wider.